The heat of the desert pressed against Doomslayer as the portal closed behind him. The air smelled of ozone and something metallic, acrid and sharp, sticking to the back of his throat with every inhale. The sand beneath him felt unusually coarse, cutting into the thick plates of his armor. He flexed his fingers, feeling the grain grind under the joints, and the vibrations of distant, unseen movement traveled through the soles of his boots. It wasn't just heat. It was pressure, like the land itself was watching him, waiting. The horizon trembled in waves of shimmering light. Cracked skeletal remnants of pre-war structures jutted from the sand, casting long, crooked shadows. Rusted billboards leaned at impossible angles, letters peeling and warped. There was no wind, only the faint, irregular hum of the irradiated ground like it was breathing. Doomslayer shifted his stance, one armored foot pressing deeper into a patch of scorched earth, the metal plates whining under the pressure. His head tilted slightly, auditory sensors straining, picking up the scuttle of something small, then the low growl of something larger, more deliberate, somewhere beyond the ruins. Movement flickered at the corner of his vision. A figure, or maybe two, emerged, limping, staggering, indistinct, disappearing into the heat haze. Doomslayer's eyes narrowed, scanning every ripple in the distance. His pulse did not rise. It never did. But he felt the faint tremor of anticipation, low and rhythmic, like a drumbeat under his ribs. The mutants here were different. He could sense their patterns, even before seeing them clearly. A sharp crack echoed. Sand exploded near his left boot. He dropped into a crouch, armor scraping against itself. A lone mutant lunged from behind a broken wall. Its skin glistened with strange mutations, pustules and veins glowing faintly green under the midday sun. The creature's claws scraped the concrete slab it had hidden behind, a grating metallic screech that vibrated up Doomslayer's spine. He rolled forward, the coarse sand cutting through his gauntlets, and landed on his knees. Doomslayer rose in one fluid motion, swinging his fist into the mutant's jaw. The impact reverberated through his forearm. He could feel the teeth break under the pressure. The creature emitted a high-pitched screech, the sound scraping at the inside of his ears, then flopped backward, twitching spasms jerking through its limbs. Doomslayer crouched over it, fingertips pressing into the slick texture of its mutated skin. The smell of iron and decay filled his nostrils. He studied the body, feeling the vibrations of life leaving it, a rhythm of entropy he was intimately familiar with. A distant roar, guttural and resonant, made the sand ripple again. Doomslayer froze, ears twitching beneath his helm, picking up subtle nuances in the vibration through the cracked earth. Something larger moved between the ruins, and the muted clang of metal suggested not just muscle and mutation, but machinery. His armored boots shifted imperceptibly, sending a soft crunch of sand outwards. A minor disturbance, almost lost in the surrounding heat haze. He advanced slowly, steps calculated, listening. Broken walls provided cover, but he did not need it. His senses reached further than sight, tracking the subtle motions of creatures, the faint hum of pre-war tech long abandoned. The ruined city seemed alive, whispering beneath his feet in shudders and vibrations, each one a warning or a lure. Dust hung in the air, and every movement stirred it into fine clouds that caught the harsh sunlight, creating shimmering halos around jagged concrete. A figure appeared on a distant ridge, silhouetted against the burning horizon. Its outline was humanoid, but the posture was wrong, jittering, unnatural, limbs moving with jerky hesitation. Doomslayer's vision tracked it, the auditory receptors picking up its breathing. uneven and rasping, the soft clicking of a prosthetic foot. A Vault-Tec jumpsuit hung loosely on its frame, the number faded, half-eaten by sun and grime. Doomslayer could feel the small pulse of its fear, a vibration almost imperceptible, and he adjusted his stance, ready, but not yet striking. The figure stumbled, and a dog, or something that had been a dog, sprang from the shadows of a crumbled building. Its fur was patchy, bristled with spines of dried resin and grit. It growled, a low, resonant rumble, hackles raised. Doomslayer crouched lower, feeling the tremor of the animal's muscles through the ground. The dog moved unpredictably, circling, sniffing the air with ragged breaths. Its eyes glimmered with an intelligence that made him pause just slightly. Here, everything had survived by adapting, by changing into something new, something dangerous. He moved forward, careful. Every step was deliberate, crunching through sand, scraping against fragments of metal and glass. The smell of scorched earth mixed with the faint tang of radiation, a low buzz of energy crawling over his skin. The dog lunged suddenly, and he twisted, catching it with a sweep of his armored forearm, the pads of his gauntlet pressing against its ribcage, feeling every heartbeat, every struggle. It whimpered but did not retreat. Doomslayer sensed that it would follow him, persistent and dangerous, much like the Wasteland itself. Above, the sky burned, a harsh, unforgiving light that made every shadow a potential threat. The ruined buildings, jagged and leaning, cast long, broken silhouettes, their textures rough under the sunlight, peeling concrete and twisted steel reflecting a distorted brilliance. The heat made the metal vibrate faintly, a resonant frequency that Doomslayer could feel through his armor. A distant, high-pitched ringing pierced the air. Pre-war electronics long abandoned, reacting to his presence. He stepped over the fallen mutant, the gritty sand giving way under his weight, dust coating his gloves. His helmet tilted slightly, focusing auditory sensors. Voices, faint, carried on the heat waves. Settlers, probably. Their tone anxious, questioning. Some sounded injured, others cautious, armed. Doomslayer moved toward the source, every muscle coiled and ready. The Wasteland was dangerous, yes, but he was a force the Wasteland did not yet understand. A sudden metallic clang startled him. A Mr. Handy unit, rusted and half-buried, clattered forward on a single arm, voice box sputtering static. "Caution! Intruder!" It repeated in warped tones, each word reverberating oddly through the ruins. Doomslayer tilted his head, registering vibrations through the armor. No threat yet. The sun glinted off its tattered metal body, every dent and scratch telling a history of survival and violence. He breathed through his mask, the sound muffled, a tactile vibration in his chest as he adjusted footing. The dog padded silently behind, and the faint smell of decay mixed with irradiated metal clung to the air. The city's ruins stretched out in all directions, empty, jagged, and alive in ways that defied logic. And Doomslayer moved through it, sensing everything, prepared for the unseen, the unmeasured, the next anomaly the Wasteland would throw at him. Every step carried a purpose, but also the weight of expectation. What would come next? The portal behind him had closed. There was no retreat. He flexed armored fingers against the coarse sand, feeling the subtle vibrations of hidden life beneath the surface. And somewhere beyond the ruins, a low growl answered, a challenge, or perhaps an invitation. The Wasteland had noticed him. The sun dipped lower, casting fractured light across twisted metal and broken concrete. Shadows grew, but Doomslayer did not flinch. Each sound, each tremor, each shift in the environment told him more than sight could alone. He tightened his grip on the gauntlet, listening, feeling, ready. The desert stretched before him, alive, strange, unpredictable. And Doomslayer stepped forward into it, boots sinking slightly into sand, armor scraping softly against the jagged edges of debris, his senses reaching for every anomaly, every movement, every whisper of life in the irradiated silence. The wasteland waited. So did he. The heat had softened into a dull pressure as Doomslayer crept between two leaning concrete slabs, their surfaces rough under the touch of his gauntlet. Dust clung to his armor, fine particles collecting in the seams, scratching against the metal with each movement. He could hear the faint trickle of wind through the jagged edges of the ruins, carrying with it the acrid scent of scorched sand and metal. The dog padded silently at his heels, muscles tensing with every subtle vibration beneath the cracked concrete. From the edge of a partially collapsed building came the faint scuff of boots on debris. Voices followed, low and hurried. Settlers, voices roughened by dust and fear. One carried a child, the soft whine of their breathing carried on the dry air. Doomslayer froze mid-step, helmet sensors tracing the vibrations of their hurried passage through the rubble. Each uneven thump against loose concrete sent a faint echo through the soles of his boots, a rhythm he could read. He leaned closer to the crumbling wall, metallic edges pressing lightly against his forearm. His eyes swept the gap between the slabs, noting details with surgical precision. The frayed edge of a Vault-Tec jumpsuit on the older man, the chipped enamel of a kid's helmet, the rusted handle of a makeshift rifle. He could hear the quick intake of breath as the child tripped on loose gravel, the sound muted but distinct under his helmet. The dog growled softly, ears pinned, tail low, tail tip brushing his armored calf. Doomslayer moved with deliberate precision, the coarse sand beneath him shifting with faint whispers of friction. He emerged slowly, crouching low, and the settlers froze. The older man's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle, fingers trembling. The child peeked out from behind his shoulder, eyes wide, mouth open but silent. Doomslayer raised a hand, but not in surrender, just a slight adjustment of posture. The sound of armor scraping subtly against itself resonated faintly, a muted warning. You're... The man began, voice cracking, the words catching on the dry dust in his throat. He swallowed and tried again. Who? What are you? Doomslayer did not answer immediately. He inhaled slowly, the vibration of the air flowing through the cracks of his mask settling into his chest. The sand shifted under his boots as he shifted his weight, the granular friction grinding subtly against the joints of his armor. He scanned the ruins behind the settlers, ears attuned to every movement, every irregularity. The dog sniffed at the man's heel, low growl vibrating the soles of his boots. The older man's eyes darted, tracking movement behind Doomslayer. Please, we're just trying to survive. Please, don't... A sudden metallic clatter cut him off. From the corner of the square, a rusted Mr. Handy unit lurched forward on one arm, sparks flying from exposed wiring. Its voice box sputtered, warping the words, "Warning, presence, intruder, unknown, hostile, calculate." Each syllable vibrated faintly against Doomslayer's ears, the odd rhythm of the broken AI making him tilt his head. The settlers flinched, stepping back, clutching the child closer. Doomslayer adjusted his posture, boots crunching softly against sand and small fragments of metal, sensing the smallest shift in the ground. He could feel the vibrations of the Mr. Handy's small electrical hum against the concrete, faint but distinct. The dog barked once, sharp and tense, ears flicking toward the moving shadow of the unit. Without a word, Doomslayer moved forward. Every step was measured, one armored boot pressing into coarse sand, heel grinding lightly against rubble. The Mr. Handy's arm twitched, sparks spraying, metal scraping against stone. The dog circled, low growl vibrating the soles of Doomslayer's boots, ears pricked. The child whimpered softly, sand and dust clinging to hair and skin, the sound of fear almost tactile in the thick air. The unit shifted suddenly, arm lurching, trying to swipe. Doomslayer pivoted with inhuman precision, gauntlet pressing into the unit's exposed wiring, feeling the faint electrical pulse through the metal. Sparks bit at his armor, heat pricking through the joint seams. The unit emitted a warped squeal, metal scraping stone, before collapsing in a heap, half-functioning servos twitching erratically. The settlers exhaled in relief, but the tension in the air remained thick. Doomslayer crouched slightly, fingers flexing against rough concrete, dust and sand clinging to armor, and studied them. The older man, eyes wide, finally spoke. "Who are you?" Doomslayer inhaled again, slow, deliberate. The wind carried the faint tang of iron and decay from broken pipes, mingling with the sun-baked smell of sand and scorched metal. The dog sniffed the air, tail swishing slowly, muscles coiled. The child whimpered again, tiny hand pressing against the older man's chest. Doomslayer did not speak. He only scanned the environment, ears picking up faint clicks of distant movement, vibrations through the cracked earth, the subtle hum of radiation mixing with broken pre-war tech. The older man swallowed audibly, trembling, then said, "Please, you're not like the others. You can help us." The words barely registered as intent. Doomslayer's attention was split between the subtle tremors of the sand beneath his boots, the faint hum of distant machinery, and the irregular breathing of the dog at his side. He flexed fingers against the coarse concrete wall, tracing minute cracks, feeling the heat radiating from metal shards, and let the settlers know without words that he had registered their plea. From the far end of the square, a low rumble began. At first faint, almost imperceptible, then growing, vibrating the ground under his boots. Doomslayer froze, sensing the pattern, every fiber of his body alert. Dust lifted slightly in the still air, the hum of the radioactive ground blending with a deep growl that rolled from the distance, carrying with it a smell of scorched metal and something foul, almost organic. The dog barked sharply, hackles raised, tail stiffening. The child whimpered, pressing closer to the man's chest. The older man followed Doomslayer's gaze, eyes widening as shadows shifted unnaturally across the ruins. It's coming," he whispered. His hand gripped the child tighter. The coarse fabric of their clothing rasped against his calloused fingers. The wind picked up slightly, brushing grit across bare skin, stinging nostrils. Doomslayer shifted his weight slightly, boots grinding against coarse sand and broken concrete, listening. Each thump of the approaching creature sent a vibration through the earth that was almost tactile through his armor. He inhaled slowly, chest rising and falling, the subtle hum of his own respirator mingling with distant growls and shifting metal. He flexed fingers against the coarse stone, feeling the faint thrum of life in the ground, measuring the threat. The sound grew louder, each rumble punctuated by a high-pitched mechanical screech. The air itself seemed to ripple, dust and fine sand swirling in circular eddies across the square. The dog crouched low, tail stiff, growling. Doomslayer adjusted posture, gauntlets scraping lightly against the concrete slab behind him, weight balanced perfectly, ready to move, ready to strike. And then it appeared, a massive figure, hulking and twisted, a mutant amalgam of muscle, metal, and mutation, skin mottled and stretched over mechanical implants. Its footsteps thudded against broken asphalt, each strike sending reverberations through Doomslayer's boots. The metallic tang of scorched flesh and oil hit his nostrils before he even saw it fully. It paused, head cocking slightly, emitting a guttural, almost intelligent growl, studying him as much as he studied it. Doomslayer inhaled through the mask, chest rising deliberately, muscles tensed beneath the armor, fingertips pressing against coarse metal, sensing vibrations. Every micro-movement, the twitch of his wrist, the subtle shift of his weight, the roll of his shoulder, was calculated. The dog snarled, circling the mutant, claws scraping lightly against concrete, the sound sharp and abrupt in the heavy air. The mutant roared, a deep, resonant sound that rattled debris and stirred sand. Doomslayer felt it as much as heard it, vibrations traveling up through boots, armor, and joints. He flexed, ready, muscles coiled beneath metal plates. Every micro-adjustment in stance, every subtle exhalation was tuned to anticipate the first lunge. The Wasteland was testing him as much as he was testing it, and he stepped forward, coarse sand shifting under armored boots, gauntlets brushing against rough concrete, dog following silently at his side, senses acute, ready to meet whatever the Wasteland threw at him first. The heat had softened into a dull pressure as Doomslayer crept between two leaning concrete slabs, their surfaces rough under the touch of his gauntlet. Dust clung to his armor, fine particles collecting in the seams, scratching against the metal with each movement. He could hear the faint trickle of wind through the jagged edges of the ruins, carrying with it the acrid scent of scorched sand and metal. The dog padded silently at his heels, muscles tensing with every subtle vibration beneath the cracked concrete. From the edge of a partially collapsed building came the faint scuff of boots on debris. Voices followed, low and hurried. Settlers, voices roughened by dust and fear. One carried a child, the soft whine of their breathing carried on the dry air. Doomslayer froze mid-step, helmet sensors tracing the vibrations of their hurried passage through the rubble. Each uneven thump against loose concrete sent a faint echo through the soles of his boots, a rhythm he could read. He leaned closer to the crumbling wall, metallic edges pressing lightly against his forearm. His eyes swept the gap between the slabs, noting details with surgical precision. The frayed edge of a Vault-Tec jumpsuit on the older man, the chipped enamel of a kid's helmet, the rusted handle of a makeshift rifle. He could hear the quick intake of breath as the child tripped on loose gravel, the sound muted but distinct under his helmet. The dog growled softly, ears pinned, tail low, tail tip brushing his armored calf. Doomslayer moved with deliberate precision, the coarse sand beneath him shifting with faint whispers of friction. He emerged slowly, crouching low, and the settlers froze. The older man's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle, fingers trembling. The child peeked out from behind his shoulder, eyes wide, mouth open but silent. Doomslayer raised a hand, but not in surrender, just a slight adjustment of posture. The sound of armor scraping subtly against itself resonated faintly, a muted warning. You're... the man began, voice cracking, the words catching on the dry dust in his throat. He swallowed and tried again. Who? What are you? Doomslayer did not answer immediately. He inhaled slowly, the vibration of the air flowing through the cracks of his mask, settling into his chest. The sand shifted under his boots as he shifted his weight. the granular friction grinding subtly against the joints of his armor. He scanned the ruins behind the settlers, ears attuned to every movement, every irregularity. The dog sniffed at the man's heel, low growl vibrating the soles of his boots. The older man's eyes darted, tracking movement behind Doomslayer. "Please, we're just trying to survive. Please, don't—" A sudden metallic clatter cut him off. From the corner of the square, a rusted Mr. Handy unit lurched forward on one arm, sparks flying from exposed wiring. Its voice box sputtered, warping the words, "Warning, presence, intruder, unknown, hostile, calculate." Each syllable vibrated faintly against Doomslayer's ears, the odd rhythm of the broken AI making him tilt his head. The settlers flinched, stepping back, clutching the child closer. Doomslayer adjusted his posture, boots crunching softly against sand and small fragments of metal, sensing the smallest shift in the ground. He could feel the vibrations of the Mr. Handy's small electrical hum against the concrete, faint but distinct. The dog barked once, sharp and tense, ears flicking toward the moving shadow of the unit. Without a word, Doomslayer moved forward. Every step was measured, one armored boot pressing into coarse sand, heel grinding lightly against rubble. The Mr. Handy's arm twitched, sparks spraying, metal scraping against stone. The dog circled, low growl vibrating the soles of Doomslayer's boots, ears pricked. The child whimpered softly, sand and dust clinging to hair and skin, the sound of fear almost tactile in the thick air. The unit shifted suddenly, arm lurching, trying to swipe. Doomslayer pivoted with inhuman precision, gauntlet pressing into the unit's exposed wiring, feeling the faint electrical pulse through the metal. Sparks bit at his armor, heat pricking through the joint seams. The unit emitted a warped squeal, metal scraping stone, before collapsing in a heap, half-functioning servos twitching erratically. The settlers exhaled in relief, but the tension in the air remained thick. Doomslayer crouched slightly, fingers flexing against rough concrete, dust and sand clinging to armor, and studied them. The older man, eyes wide, finally spoke. "Who are you?" Doomslayer inhaled again, slow, deliberate. The wind carried the faint tang of iron and decay from broken pipes, mingling with the sun-baked smell of sand and scorched metal. The dog sniffed the air, tail swishing slowly, muscles coiled. The child whimpered again, tiny hand pressing against the older man's chest. Doomslayer did not speak. He only scanned the environment, ears picking up faint clicks of distant movement, vibrations through the cracked earth, the subtle hum of radiation mixing with broken pre-war tech. The older man swallowed audibly, trembling, then said, "Please, you're not like the others. You can help us." The words barely registered as intent. Doomslayer's attention was split between the subtle tremors of the sand beneath his boots, the faint hum of distant machinery, and the irregular breathing of the dog at his side. He flexed fingers against the coarse concrete wall, tracing minute cracks, feeling the heat radiating from metal shards, and let the settlers know without words that he had registered their plea. From the far end of the square, a low rumble began, at first faint, almost imperceptible, then growing, vibrating the ground under his boots. Doomslayer froze, sensing the pattern, every fiber of his body alert. Dust lifted slightly in the still air, the hum of the radioactive ground blending with a deep growl that rolled from the distance, carrying with it a smell of scorched metal and something foul, almost organic. The dog barked sharply, hackles raised, tail stiffening. The child whimpered, pressing closer to the man's chest. The older man followed Doomslayer's gaze, eyes widening as shadows shifted unnaturally across the ruins. It's coming," he whispered. His hand gripped the child tighter. The coarse fabric of their clothing rasped against his calloused fingers. The wind picked up slightly, brushing grit across bare skin, stinging nostrils. Doomslayer shifted his weight slightly, boots grinding against coarse sand and broken concrete, listening. Each thump of the approaching creature sent a vibration through the earth that was almost tactile through his armor. He inhaled slowly, chest rising and falling, the subtle hum of his own respirator mingling with distant growls and shifting metal. He flexed fingers against the coarse stone, feeling the faint thrum of life in the ground, measuring the threat. The sound grew louder, each rumble punctuated by a high-pitched mechanical screech. The air itself seemed to ripple, dust and fine sand swirling in circular eddies across the square. The dog crouched low, tail stiff, growling sullenly. Doomslayer adjusted posture, gauntlets scraping lightly against the concrete slab behind him, weight balanced perfectly, ready to move, ready to strike. And then it appeared, a massive figure, hulking and twisted, a mutant amalgam of muscle, metal, and mutation, skin mottled and stretched over mechanical implants. Its footsteps thudded against broken asphalt, each strike sending reverberations through Doomslayer's boots. The metallic tang of scorched flesh and oil hit his nostrils before he even saw it fully. It paused, head cocking slightly, emitting a guttural, almost intelligent growl, studying him as much as he studied it. Doomslayer inhaled through the mask, chest rising deliberately, muscles tensed beneath the armor, fingertips pressing against coarse metal, sensing vibrations. Every micro-movement, the twitch of his wrist, the subtle shift of his weight, the roll of his shoulder, was calculated. The dog snarled, circling the mutant, claws scraping lightly against concrete, the sound sharp and abrupt in the heavy air. The mutant roared, a deep, resonant sound that rattled debris and stirred sand. Doomslayer felt it as much as heard it, vibrations traveling up through boots, armor, and joints. He flexed, ready, muscles coiled beneath metal plates. Every micro-adjustment in stance, every subtle exhalation was tuned to anticipate the first lunge. The Wasteland was testing him as much as he was testing it. And he stepped forward, coarse sand shifting under armored boots, gauntlets brushing against rough concrete, dog following silently at his side, senses acute, ready to meet whatever the Wasteland threw at him first. The ruins of the outpost stretched before Doomslayer, jagged concrete walls leaning at impossible angles, shadows scraping across scorched sand. The air was thick, almost viscous, carrying a metallic tang and the faint hum of residual radiation. The dog padded ahead cautiously, claws rasping against broken asphalt, tail stiff, ears flicking at every shift in the ruins. Doomslayer crouched behind a collapsed wall, fingers pressing into coarse concrete, feeling the vibration of distant movement through the ground. Something was stirring, subtle tremors that suggested intelligence, not just instinct. A mutant, smaller than the hulking behemoth he had faced earlier, emerged from a broken doorway. Its skin glistened with sticky, irradiated residue, veins tracing unnatural patterns under its mottled surface. It paused, head cocking slightly, listening. Doomslayer flexed his fingers on the rough concrete, adjusting posture, boots crunching softly over gravel. He could feel the air pressure change subtly as it shifted, the vibrations in the sand beneath him telling the tale of weight, balance, and intent. He inhaled through the mask, chest rising and falling with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The smell of decay mixed with burnt metal stung the back of his throat. He exhaled, muscles coiling under the armor, every joint and plate ready. The mutant's head jerked suddenly, and it lunged forward with claws scraping concrete, a sound that grated against the inside of his helmet. Doomslayer sidestepped with precise timing, sand grinding against the soles of his boots. Fingers pressed into jagged metal for leverage, the texture rough and sharp, vibrations of impact traveling up his arms. From the shadows, a group of raiders appeared, weapons raised, boots scuffing on broken metal plates. They wore scraps of pre-war armor, helmets dented and scorched, rifles flicking in the harsh sunlight. One barked an order, voice cracking, the words bouncing off jagged walls. Doomslayer adjusted stance, shifting weight, sensing the micro-vibrations of their movement through the ground. He did not flinch. The dog growled low, tail stiff, muscles coiled like springs. The mutant swung at a raider, claws ripping through rusted metal, sparks flying where it connected. Doomslayer reacted instinctively, rolling across coarse sand, armor scraping against rubble, then landing behind a splintered wall. Fingers gripped exposed concrete, rough texture biting through gloves. The dog darted forward, snapping at exposed legs, claws scraping stone. Doomslayer pivoted, armored elbow connecting with the mutant's side, impact reverberating up his arm. The creature shrieked, a high, grating sound that mingled with the roar of raider firearms, bullets pinging off jagged steel and concrete. A second mutant appeared, thin and quick, moving with jerky, unpredictable steps. Doomslayer felt the vibrations of its movement through the sand. Each microstep a signal he interpreted before sight confirmed it. He leapt onto a broken beam, boots scraping metal, sand cascading from the shift in weight. Fingers gripped jagged rebar protruding from the concrete, biting into rough metal, and swung downward, connecting with a sharp crack against mutant bone and mechanical augmentation. Sparks flew, mingling with a coppery tang of blood, and irradiated ichor in the sun-baked air. The raiders tried to advance, but Doomslayer was a pivot point of controlled chaos. He shifted, boots sinking slightly into sand, armor plates grinding softly as he brought force to bear. The dog lunged at exposed limbs, teeth snapping, claws scraping, emitting a resonant vibration through the surrounding rubble. Doomslayer felt the recoil through his gauntlets, the pressure of impact traveling up his forearm into his chest, every fiber attuned to threat and counter. From above, a rusted Mr. Handy unit hovered into view, propellers cutting hot, dusty air. Sparks arced from frayed wiring, sensors flickering blue. Its warped, sputtering voice box emitted fragmented warnings. Intruder, hostile, unknown, engage. The sound reverberated across the ruins, metal scraping, harmonizing with mutant shrieks and bullets striking concrete. Doomslayer shifted stance slightly, coiling his body, boots pressing firmly into sand, fingers flexing against rough metal for leverage. One of the raiders attempted to flank him, stepping over twisted debris. Doomslayer turned, armored fist connecting with the side of the man's helmet, a dull thud vibrating up through his wrist. The raider crumpled, sliding across jagged sand and concrete, sparks from a broken visor scattering lightly. Another tried to shoot. Doomslayer pivoted, gauntlets scraping stone, fists connecting in rapid succession. Sand and dust exploded outward with each strike, coating armor in gritty layers. The two mutants converged on him again. Doomslayer adjusted, boots pressing firmly into rough concrete, fingers gripping splintered metal for leverage. He launched forward, gauntlets smashing into one's mechanical implants, sending sparks and a fine metallic tang into the air. The second mutant struck at the dog. Doomslayer intercepted, elbow catching the creature mid-lunge, pressure rippling through armor and bone. The dog darted behind him, tail lashing, growl low, body tensing with coiled energy. Bullets whizzed past, ricocheting off walls, embedding in cracked concrete. Doomslayer felt the micro-vibrations in the sand, sensing trajectories, estimating force and angle, predicting movement almost before it happened. Sparks from metal meeting metal illuminated dust particles, drifting slowly in the heat haze. He twisted, pivoted, and struck again, every movement precise, coiled energy released, limbs acting in perfect synchronization. The mutants fell in sequence, twitching spasms jerking violently as life left them. The raiders hesitated, then bolted, boots crunching over rubble, dust rising in ragged clouds. Mr. Handy units sputtered away, sparks trailing as they retreated, their metallic hum fading into the background. The air stilled slightly, carrying the lingering coppery smell of blood, scorched metal, and irradiated flesh. Doomslayer exhaled slowly through the respirator, chest rising beneath armor plates, feeling vibrations of settling rubble beneath his boots. The dog sat back on haunches, ears flicked toward distant movement, tail flicking once. Dust clung to armor and fur, a fine grit catching in every joint, every seam. He flexed armored fingers against jagged concrete, feeling texture, temperature, vibration, and weight. The ruins were silent now, except for distant whispers of movement. Doomslayer scanned the horizon carefully, every vibration, every subtle shift in sand or metal alerting him to unseen presences. The Wasteland had tested him again, and he had prevailed. But the test was not over. Far beyond the ruins, shadows shifted against sun-baked concrete. Something larger, deliberate, and far more dangerous than the mutants or raiders was waiting. Doomslayer adjusted posture, boots pressing into coarse sand, gauntlets scraping lightly against splintered rebar, chest rising and falling deliberately. The dog nudged his side, alert. The air was thick with tension, metallic tang, and dust clinging to every surface. He inhaled slowly, muscles coiled, senses stretched taut. The Wasteland was speaking, and he was listening. The ruins breathed around them, the low hum of irradiated metal vibrating faintly through the sand. Doomslayer crouched behind the jagged edge of a collapsed overpass, armor scraping lightly against fractured concrete, boots pressing into coarse sand. The dog padded beside him, low growl vibrating through his armored soles. Beyond the broken square, the First Brotherhood of Steel Patrol had halted, scanning, tense, weapons raised. From a side alley came the soft whine of hydraulics, followed by the clatter of metal against rubble. A figure emerged, half human, half machine, a former vault dweller who had fused crude cybernetic implants into her body. Sparks flickered from her left arm, exposed wiring glinting in the dying sunlight. "Hey!" she called in a rough voice, adjusting a cracked eyepiece. "You look like you could use help." Doomslayer remained motionless, chest rising under the armor, fingers pressing against rough concrete. The vibrations in the sand beneath him conveyed more than her words. Tentative, calculating, uncertain. He tilted his head slightly, measuring. The dog growled softly, hackles raised, tail stiff. She approached cautiously, boots crunching over fragments of glass and metal. Dust clung to her patched clothing and exposed cybernetics. "Name's Rin," she said, voice low, almost swallowed by the thick metallic air. "I know how these streets move, and I know which shadows to trust." She extended a mechanical hand briefly, then drew it back, sparks flicking. Doomslayer did not answer. He flexed armored fingers against jagged concrete, sensing the micro-vibrations of her movements. A faint scrape echoed from the ruins behind them. The Brotherhood patrol shifted, rifles aligning with micro-precision, servo joints whining softly. One soldier's visor caught sunlight, reflecting the fractured landscape like a jagged mirror. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, sensing the vibrations in the sand, measuring force, distance, and intent. The air carried the metallic tang of sun-baked steel, the acrid scent of irradiated dust, and the faint coppery odor of blood from the earlier mutants. Rin ducked behind a low wall beside him, eyes scanning. "They're not here to negotiate," she whispered, the hiss of hydraulic servos punctuating each word. The dog shifted, muscles coiled, tail stiff, sensing the tension. Doomslayer did not move. Instead, he adjusted weight subtly, armored plates scraping each other, listening to the micro-vibrations of the approaching soldiers. The lead Brotherhood soldier spoke again, voice mechanical, cutting through the metallic tang in the air. "Step forward. Identify yourself." Each word carried weight, resonating off the fractured concrete. Rin glanced at Doomslayer, a flicker of hesitation in her expression. "They'll fire if you move first. Let me try." She stepped forward, boots crunching on sand and rubble. Sparks flew from the servo joints in her legs, mixing with the dust in the sunlight. Doomslayer shifted slightly, toes pressing into coarse sand, boots grinding lightly over broken shards of metal, fingers flexed against jagged concrete, muscles coiled under armor. The dog circled low, growl vibrating subtly, sensing potential hostility. The soldiers paused, rifles trained, eyes flicking to Rin, then Doomslayer, measuring risk. She raised her hand slowly. "We're survivors," she said, "not your enemies." Her mechanical arm buzzed faintly, heat rising off exposed servos, mingling with the warmth of the late sun. The vibrations in the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots confirmed her motion, cautious and deliberate. The lead soldier shifted weight, servo joints creaking softly but did not fire. Then a faint rumble came from the far side of the square. A hulking mutant, larger than any Doomslayer had faced yet, emerged from a dust-shimmered ruin, muscle and mechanical augmentation straining. Sparks flew from exposed implants with each step, concrete cracking under immense weight. The dog barked sharply, muscles coiled, tail stiff, low growl vibrating through the sand. Rin cursed softly, hydraulics hissing. "Not your average patrol, huh?" she muttered. She gestured toward a narrow alley to Doomslayer, suggesting a tactical advantage. Doomslayer did not respond with words. His boots shifted over coarse sand, gauntlets brushing jagged concrete, adjusting stance, preparing for impact. The mutant lunged, claws scraping concrete, metal screaming against stone. Doomslayer rolled, sand grinding under armored joints, pivoting toward a fractured beam. Fingers flexed around jagged metal, gripping tightly, feeling the vibrations of impact through forearm and chest. Sparks and dust erupted as gauntlet collided with reinforced sinew and circuitry. The dog lunged, teeth snapping, claws rasping, vibrating through the rubble. Rin followed, stepping lightly, hydraulic servos squeaking, throwing makeshift grenades toward the mutant's flanks. Explosions kicked up clouds of dust, acrid and metallic, stinging nostrils. Doomslayer used the micro moments of confusion to strike, armored fist driving into mechanical augmentation, sparks and thick red fluid spraying across sand and concrete. The mutant staggered but did not fall, momentum carrying it toward the Brotherhood soldiers, who froze, rifles raising slowly, hesitating in calculated uncertainty. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising under armor, fingers gripping jagged concrete for stability. He sensed the subtle tremor in the sand as the mutant's bulk shifted, Rin moving beside him now as an unexpected pivot of unpredictability. The dog circled, growling, muscles coiled, tail stiff. Every micro-movement, the tilt of his torso, the flex of his wrist, the shift of his boots, was calculated, precise, predatory. The mutant toppled finally, a combination of brute force and micro-tactical precision, sparks spraying, metal grinding, and thick coppery fluid filling cracks in the concrete. Dust settled slowly, metallic tang heavy in the air, faint hum of radiation lingering. The dog licked at the residue cautiously, tail flicking once. Rin exhaled, sparks hissing faintly from her mechanical arm, sand clinging to her boots and servos. Doomslayer remained motionless for a moment, scanning the ruins, sensing the micro-vibrations of settling rubble, the subtle shifts of the Brotherhood soldiers still holding position, the faint stir of wind carrying dust and metallic tang. Rin glanced at him, waiting, her mechanical eye flickering in the dimming sun. He tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her presence without words. The Wasteland had added a new variable, unpredictable and volatile to his path, and for now, she was part of it. The square lay bathed in the dimming light, shadows stretching jagged across cracked concrete and twisted metal. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers tracing the rough edges of a fractured wall. The dog sniffed at a pile of debris nearby, tail stiff, muscles coiled, growl low and vibrating faintly through the sand. Rin followed a step behind, mechanical servos hissing softly as she moved. Boots crunching over rubble. Sparks flickered from her exposed arm, illuminating jagged fragments of metal and glass scattered across the ground. From the far end of the square came faint voices, harsh and uneven, carrying over the thick metallic air. Settlers, trapped between factions and mutants, stumbled toward the ruined overpass. One limped heavily, the smell of sweat and dust clinging to tattered clothing, the child clinging to their arm, whimpering softly. Doomslayer adjusted his stance slightly, boots shifting on coarse sand, armored plates scraping gently against each other. He could feel every vibration, every tremor through the soles of his boots, calculating the movement of the newcomers. Rin tilted her head, hydraulic servos hissing softly. "They need help," she said, voice low, almost swallowed by the ambient metallic tang. "Mutants took half their group. Raiders are circling the outer walls. They won't make it without someone like you." She gestured toward the narrow alley that led to the survivors. Doomslayer did not respond with words. Instead, he flexed his armored fingers against the rough concrete wall, feeling every micro-vibration, the shift in sand under their weight, the slight hum of radiation, the faint metallic resonance of distant machinery. A low rumble came from beyond the ruins. A mutant, medium-sized, scaled and mechanical augmentations, glinting in the fading sun, emerged from the dust-shimmered horizon. Its claws scraped against broken metal, sparks flying where it struck. The dog growled, low and menacing, tail stiffening. Doomslayer shifted his weight, boots grinding slightly over sand and debris, gauntlets scraping jagged concrete for balance. Every micro-movement was precise, calculated, anticipating the mutant's next lunge. Rin moved forward cautiously, keeping low. "I'll flank," she whispered, fingers brushing the trigger of her makeshift rifle. Sparks from her arm flickered faintly, illuminating dust motes in the air. She darted between crumbled walls, steps measured, boots scraping broken asphalt and concrete fragments. The mutant paused, sensing the movement, claws scraping, emitting a shrill, metallic hiss. Doomslayer leapt from cover, armored fist connecting with the mutant's reinforced midsection. The impact reverberated through his forearm, armor plates vibrating with the force, sand sprayed in fine arcs, grit embedding into joints and seams. The mutant roared, staggering backward, mechanical whines and guttural shrieks mingling with the metallic tang of blood and dust. The dog lunged at exposed legs, teeth snapping, claws rasping, the vibration traveling up through Doomslayer's boots. Rin fired from the side, bullets thudding into the mutant's augmented plating, sparks flying, metallic smell sharp in the air. The mutant's movements became jerky, uncoordinated, servos straining under damage. Doomslayer adjusted stance, shifting weight subtly, pressing fingertips against jagged concrete, sensing micro-vibrations as it lunged again. He twisted, armored elbow catching the mutant mid-swipe, muscles coiling, forearm absorbing impact. The mutant toppled, twitching spasms jerking violently as life and circuitry ebbed away. Sand stirred around its bulk, fine dust settling slowly over broken concrete and twisted metal. The dog sniffed cautiously, tail flicking once. Rin exhaled, sparks hissing from her mechanical arm, grit clinging to her boots. She glanced at Doomslayer, waiting silently. He shifted slightly, armored plates grinding softly, head tilting as he scanned the square. The settlers were frozen, wide-eyed, watching the interaction. Breaths shallow and uneven. From the edge of the square, faint clanking announced the approach of another party. Raiders this time, boots pounding over cracked asphalt, weapons glinting under the last rays of the sun. The smell of sweat and crude oil mixed with the metallic tang of sand and dust. Doomslayer sensed the vibrations in the ground before sight confirmed it, adjusting stance, boots pressing into coarse sand, gauntlets scraping jagged metal. Rin crouched beside him, voice low. "We can get the settlers to cover, but I'll need you to draw attention," she said, hydraulic servos hissing softly with movement. Doomslayer shifted, flexing fingers against the rough wall, reading the micro-vibrations in the sand, anticipating the raiders' approach. He inhaled slowly through the respirator, chest rising deliberately under armored plates, sensing every micro-tremor, every subtle shift in air pressure and heat. The raiders burst into view, weapons raised, shouting guttural commands. Dust and grit rose in thick clouds, swirling around jagged debris. Sparks from broken metal caught in the last light of sun, illuminating twisted steel and shattered concrete. Doomslayer launched forward, boots grinding against sand, armor scraping stone and rebar. His fist collided with one raider's chest plate, sending a dull vibration through forearm and armor, knocking the figure sideways into rubble. Rin moved quickly, stepping over debris, hydraulic servos whirring, gun discharging in controlled bursts. Bullets struck metal and stone, ricocheting, sending small showers of sparks. The dog leapt low, teeth snapping, claws scraping broken concrete, adding chaos to the precise pattern of movement Doomslayer controlled. Each step, each micro-movement was deliberate. Every vibration, every sound registered and analyzed, coordinating instinct with precision. The raiders hesitated. A brief opening. Doomslayer seized it, pivoting, fists smashing into exposed plating, sending sparks and blood across coarse sand. One fell, twitching, another staggered back. Rin fired again, mechanical arm hissing as sparks flew, dust and grit clinging to boots and armor. The dog circled low, growl vibrating through sand, muscles coiled, ready for another attack. Finally, The square settled, dust drifting in fine clouds over rubble and twisted steel. The metallic tang hung heavy in the air, mixed with sweat and scorched flesh. The settlers shuffled forward cautiously, wide-eyed, child clutching one parent's arm, breaths shallow and uneven. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, sensing micro-vibrations in the sand, scanning for any remaining threats. Rin crouched beside him, hydraulic servos hissing softly. "They're gone. For now," she whispered, sparks flickering from exposed wiring, dust clinging to boots. Doomslayer inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her presence. The dog settled low, ears flicking toward distant sounds, tail tip twitching. The Wasteland had tested them again, but the survivors had made it this far, for now. The ruins smelled of scorched metal and irradiated sand, a thick, acrid tang that clung to Doomslayer's respirator and coated the dog's fur in fine dust. He crouched behind a fractured overpass, fingers pressing into coarse concrete, feeling vibrations travel up from the cracked asphalt below. Each footfall of the approaching settlers echoed faintly, micro-tremors in the sand, signaling tension, fear, and hesitation. Rin moved beside him, hydraulic servos hissing softly, boots crunching over shards of broken concrete and twisted metal. Sparks flickered from her exposed arm, illuminating dust motes in the late afternoon light. "Keep low," she murmured, voice almost swallowed by the metallic hum of the ruins. She tilted her mechanical head toward the settlers, who shuffled uncertainly toward a temporary shelter made from rusted steel plates and fallen walls. The child whimpered softly, sand clinging to hair and skin, the faint coppery smell of sweat mixing with dust. Doomslayer did not answer with words. He inhaled slowly, chest rising beneath reinforced plates, boots pressing into coarse sand, sensing every micro-vibration, every subtle shift of the ground. A distant clattering interrupted the fragile calm. Raiders, light-armored but swift, were circling from the west, weapons raised, boots scuffing cracked asphalt and broken metal. Sparks flew from exposed plating as their momentum shifted. The dog growled low, tail stiff, muscles coiled, sensing the incoming threat before eyes could confirm it. Doomslayer adjusted his stance, shifting weight, fingers pressing into jagged concrete, micro-vibrations conveying the raider's movements. Rin crouched beside him, hissing softly through the hydraulics of her arm. "If we want to get the settlers safe, you're going to have to draw attention," she said. Sparks flickered from a worn servo on her shoulder, dust clinging to the edges of her armor. "I'll cover their flank." She darted forward, boots scraping sand and rubble, a flash of motion among fractured walls. Doomslayer moved next, boots sinking slightly into coarse sand, armor scraping stone and metal with subtle groans, adjusting stance with coiled precision. He inhaled, tasting the acrid metallic tang of irradiated air. The raiders surged forward, shouting commands, the sound bouncing sharply across broken concrete and twisted steel. Their boots pounded rhythmically, micro-vibrations rippling through the sand beneath his feet. He struck first. Armored fist collided with one raider's chest plate, sending a dull vibration up through gauntlet and forearm. Sparks erupted from the impact, dust lifting in fine clouds. The dog darted forward, teeth snapping, claws scraping broken concrete, adding an unpredictable element to the controlled chaos. Rin followed from a side alley, firing controlled bursts, sparks flying from metal plating and dust settling in slow, shimmering arcs. Another raider lunged from cover, knife glinting in the dim light. Doomslayer pivoted, boots grinding against coarse sand and concrete, fingers gripping jagged metal for leverage. His elbow caught the attacker mid-swipe, armor plates absorbing the force with a resonant clang. The raider stumbled back, metallic plating dented, and Rin stepped in, hydraulic servos hissing, a well-placed shot sending the raider sprawling over rubble. Suddenly, a tremor ran through the square, subtle but noticeable beneath his armored boots. The ground shifted as pre-war infrastructure, long decayed, groaned under stress. A partially collapsed wall shuddered, fragments of metal and concrete tilting precariously above the settlers. Doomslayer instinctively leapt forward, gauntlets gripping jagged concrete, muscles coiling, positioning himself beneath the falling debris. The dog barked sharply, darting to intercept a smaller fragment, teeth and claws deflecting it away from the nearest settler. Rin shouted over the din, hydraulic arm hissing as she yanked a child from the edge of the rubble, boots crunching coarse sand. Sparks flew where her prosthetic hand caught the jagged metal, and dust sprayed into the fading sunlight. The child clutched her arm, whimpering, while Doomslayer adjusted stance, pressing armored forearm against a slab, the coarse texture grounding him as he leveraged the weight of the debris away from the others. Raiders hesitated, micro-vibrations of fear and calculation rippling through the sand beneath them. Doomslayer twisted, fist smashing into a raider's jaw, sending him sliding across broken asphalt and concrete. Rin fired another burst, sparks flying from metal plating, dust clinging to every surface. The dog circled low, growl vibrating subtly, muscles coiled, tail stiff. Each micro-movement in the square, every scrape, every vibration, every flash of light, was recorded, analyzed, integrated into Doomslayer's anticipation of the next threat. The square slowly settled into tense silence. Dust drifted in arcs over fractured concrete and twisted steel. The metallic tang hung heavy, mixed with the scent of scorched flesh and sweat. Settlers huddled close, breaths shallow, eyes wide, clinging to walls and each other. The dog lowered its hackles but remained alert. Rin exhaled, sparks hissing faintly from her arm, grit clinging to boots and servos. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressing into rough concrete, sensing every micro-vibration, every subtle shift in the sand, every distant tremor. The Wasteland had tested them again, but this time the humans, the mutants, the raiders, and even the precarious ruins had all been accounted for. He tilted his head slightly at Rin, acknowledging her presence without words. The dog nudged at his side, tail tip twitching. Beyond the square, the faint hum of irradiated ground mingled with distant groans and shifting rubble. Sparks from a partially destroyed Mr. Handy unit flickered faintly in the shadows. Doomslayer inhaled slowly through the respirator, chest rising deliberately, armored plates scraping lightly as he shifted stance. The wasteland was quiet for now, but the tension in the air, the vibrations through the sand, and the metallic tang lingering on their senses warned that the next challenge was approaching. The sun had dipped almost completely, leaving the ruins bathed in a dim, copper-tinged light. Shadows stretched jagged across fractured concrete and twisted steel, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of scorched metal. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers brushing jagged edges of rubble, reading vibrations in the ground like a second heartbeat. The dog stayed close, tail stiff, low growl vibrating faintly through the sand. Rin had moved to the edge of the square, scanning for survivors. Sparks flickered from her exposed arm, illuminating the fine dust that clung to her hydraulic servos. "I think some of them are trapped," she murmured, voice low, mechanical eye flickering. Her boot shifted on broken concrete, and the faint micro-vibration ran through the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots. He detected it instantly. Slight imbalance, a potential collapse waiting to happen. Before he could react fully, a partially collapsed wall shuddered violently. Dust and grit cascaded down, the acrid tang of crushed concrete mixing with faint coppery blood from a settler who had been pushed to the edge of the rubble. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent's chest. Rin froze, hydraulic arm hissing softly. I miscalculated, she admitted, eyes wide behind cracked visor. Sparks flickered from exposed wiring, dust clinging to her boots and servos. Doomslayer reacted instantly, boots pressed into coarse sand, armored plates grinding softly as he shifted weight, fingers flexing against jagged concrete. He pivoted, grabbing a loose steel beam from the debris, feeling every vibration and micro-shift as he braced it against the falling wall. The dog darted forward, low and precise, teeth snapping, claws rasping metal and stone to deflect smaller shards away from the survivors. The settlers froze, breaths shallow, eyes wide with fear. Doomslayer inhaled slowly through the respirator, chest rising deliberately beneath reinforced plates, feeling every micro-tremor in the sand, every shift in pressure from the settling rubble. He adjusted stance subtly, boots grinding into coarse fragments, fingers pressing jagged edges into the beam, muscles coiled like springs. A sudden clatter echoed from the opposite side of the square. Raiders, alerted by the commotion, surged from broken walls, boots pounding cracked asphalt, weapons raised. Their approach sent micro-vibrations through the sand, resonating faintly up Doomslayer's armored legs. The metallic tang of sweat and crude oil mixed with dust and scorched metal, heavy and acrid in his nostrils. Rin hesitated, sparks flickering from her arm. "I can," she began, but a shard of falling concrete forced her back. Doomslayer pivoted sharply, gauntlet scraping jagged rebar, and drove her safely to cover. Dust sprayed into the dim light, clinging to her servos. She swallowed, chest rising, and sank behind a low wall. "Sorry," she muttered, voice soft. Doomslayer didn't answer. He shifted weight subtly, boots pressing into coarse sand, flexing fingers against jagged concrete, feeling micro-vibrations of every movement, the falling debris, the approaching raiders, the settling rubble threatening the trapped settlers. He inhaled slowly, tasting the metallic tang in the air, the sharp, acrid odor of dust and irradiated grit, the faint coppery hint of blood. The first raider lunged, knife glinting in the dim light. Doomslayer pivoted, elbow catching the attacker mid-swipe, force reverberating through armor and sand. Sparks flew where metal met metal, coarse grit embedding in gloves and joints. The dog lunged, teeth snapping, claws scraping stone, forcing the raider off balance. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging against metal plating. The micro-vibrations of each impact carried through the sand to Doomslayer's boots, allowing him to anticipate the next movement of the remaining raiders. He pivoted, armored fists smashing into plating and exposed limbs, coarse sand spraying in arcs, micro-shifts in debris sending sparks into the dim light. A section of the collapsed wall began to tilt again, unstable from the earlier impact. Doomslayer adjusted instantly, pressing armored forearm against the shifting concrete, gauntlet scraping stone, boots grinding into sand for leverage. Dust and grit cascaded over his armor, clinging to each seam. He felt every vibration, every micro-tremor, every subtle shift of the ground coiling and releasing as necessary. The raiders faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation spreading through the sand beneath their boots. Doomslayer struck decisively, fists smashing into reinforced plating, sending sparks and coarse sand into the air. One fell, another staggered, and the final raider paused, eyes flicking toward the trapped settlers, calculating risk. Finally, the square settled into tense silence. Dust drifted slowly, metallic tang heavy in the air, mixed with faint coppery blood. Settlers huddled together, breaths shallow, wide-eyed, pressed against walls and each other. Rin lowered her mechanical arm, sparks hissing softly, grit clinging to joints. The dog circled low, tail tip twitching, ears flicking toward distant shifts in rubble and sand. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Micro-vibrations still pulsed faintly through the square, settling debris, distant muttering of unseen raiders, faint hum of irradiated metal. He tilted his head slightly at Rin, acknowledging her presence without words. She had faltered, yes, but he had corrected the danger, adapted, protected the innocent. The ruins were silent for a moment, save for the low hiss of hydraulics and the faint wind stirring dust across fractured concrete. The Wasteland had tested them again, and for now they had survived. But Doomslayer knew the next misstep, his own or someone else's, would bring even greater consequences. The ruins were bathed in the gray-blue light of early evening. Shadows stretched jagged across fractured concrete and twisted steel. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers tracing jagged edges of debris. The dog padded close, tail stiff, muscles coiled, growl low and steady. Sparks flickered faintly from Rin's mechanical arm as she adjusted her footing, hydraulic servos hissing softly, boots scraping against shards of broken asphalt. From the far edge of the square came the faint sound of metal scraping against rubble. Raiders, heavier armored than before, were moving in coordinated steps, their boots sending micro-vibrations through the sand. Doomslayer inhaled slowly through his respirator, chest rising deliberately beneath reinforced plates. Every micro-tremor, every subtle shift in the debris, every faint metallic echo was recorded, analyzed, and integrated into his awareness. The acrid tang of dust and scorched metal clung to the air, mixing with the faint coppery smell of blood from previous skirmishes. "Settlers are still exposed," Rin muttered, mechanical eye flickering. Sparks flickered from her arm as she pointed toward a partially collapsed structure where the civilians huddled. "We need to move them. I can help cover." She stepped forward, boots crunching against coarse sand and broken concrete, inadvertently kicking up dust that hung in the dim light. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly, analyzing the micro-vibrations of her movements. He detected a subtle imbalance in her footing, a fractionally uneven weight shift. Before he could react verbally, a section of loose metal roofing creaked violently above the settlers, dust cascading down in fine arcs. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent, and Rin froze mid-step, sparks flickering from exposed wiring in her arm. Doomslayer reacted instantly. He shifted weight, boots pressing into coarse sand, armored forearm scraping jagged concrete as he lunged beneath the falling debris. The dog darted low, teeth snapping, claws rasping metal and stone to deflect smaller shards. The settlers flinched, breaths shallow, wide-eyed, pressed against walls and rubble. Raiders surged forward from shadowed alleys, boots pounding the cracked asphalt. Weapons glinted under the fading light, each movement sending vibrations through the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots. He pivoted, armored fists smashing into one raider's chest plate, the impact reverberating through forearm and sand. Sparks erupted from the collision, grit embedding in gloves and armor joints. The dog lunged, snapping teeth at exposed legs, claws scraping stone. Rin stepped in with a burst of controlled fire, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging against metal plating and concrete. The vibrations from each impact registered through Doomslayer's boots, allowing him to anticipate the raiders' movements before they fully committed. He pivoted, armored elbow catching a raider mid-lunge, force rippling through sand and armor. Another strike sent a raider sprawling into rubble, sparks and coarse dust scattering into the dimming light. A tremor ran through the square, subtle but unmistakable beneath Doomslayer's armored boots. The partially collapsed overpass groaned, shifting precariously. Dust cascaded down, mingling with the metallic tang and coppery scent of blood. Doomslayer pivoted sharply, pressing his gauntleted forearm against the concrete, boots grinding into sand for leverage. The dog barked sharply, muscles coiling, tail stiff, sensing the imminent collapse. Rin scrambled back, sparks hissing from her mechanical arm as she tried to stabilize herself. I didn't see that coming," she shouted, voice clipped and mechanical. Doomslayer adjusted stance slightly, fingers gripping jagged concrete, sensing the micro-vibrations from both the settling debris and the advancing raiders. He inhaled deliberately, chest rising, muscles coiled under reinforced plates. The raiders faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through the sand. Doomslayer seized the moment, pivoting, fists smashing into reinforced plating and exposed limbs, dust and sparks erupting in fine arcs. The dog circled low, growl vibrating faintly, claws rasping concrete, teeth snapping with precision. One raider went down, another staggered, the last hesitated, calculating risk before retreating. The square slowly settled into tense silence. Dust hung in thick clouds, metallic tang heavy in the air, faint hum of radiation lingering. The settlers clutched each other, breaths shallow, eyes wide, pressed against rubble and jagged steel. Rin exhaled, sparks hissing softly from her arm, dust clinging to boots and servos. The dog nudged Doomslayer's side, tail tip twitching. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath armor plates. Micro-vibrations still pulsed faintly through the square, the settling debris, distant muttering of unseen raiders, faint hum of irradiated metal. He tilted his head slightly at Rin, acknowledging her presence without words. She had faltered again, yes, but he had corrected the danger, adapted, protected the innocents. In the dimming light, shadows stretched longer across fractured concrete. The metallic tang of dust and scorched metal hung heavy. Every vibration, every subtle shift, every whisper of movement through the sand spoke a warning. The Wasteland was far from finished testing them. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, scanning the ruins. The next challenge was coming. He would be ready. The square had grown darker, the last light of the sun sliding behind jagged ruins, leaving fractured concrete and twisted steel in shadowed gray. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers brushing jagged edges of debris. The dog padded close, tail stiff, muscles coiled, low growl vibrating faintly through the sand. Sparks flickered intermittently from Rin's mechanical arm as she adjusted her footing, hydraulic servos hissing softly. She moved ahead toward a half-collapsed building where the settlers had taken temporary cover, boots crunching over broken concrete and loose rubble. From the far edge of the square came the faint, rhythmic clank of armored boots. Raiders, larger and more organized than before, emerged from shadowed alleys. Their weapons glinted faintly in the dim light, sending micro-vibrations through the sand that pulsed up Doomslayer's armored legs. The acrid tang of dust, scorched metal, and faint coppery blood filled the air. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately beneath reinforced plates. Every micro-shift, every vibration, every faint sound was registered, analyzed, and stored. "Settlers can't hold out for long," Rin muttered, hydraulic servos hissing. Sparks flickered faintly along the exposed wiring of her arm. "If we don't act now—" She paused, hesitating on loose rubble. Doomslayer noticed the slight misalignment in her footing, the subtle micro-vibration of instability. He flexed armored fingers against jagged concrete, sensing the uneven weight and anticipating the imminent danger. The first raider lunged from cover, knife glinting in dim light. Doomslayer pivoted, elbow catching the attack mid-swipe, vibration rippling through armor and coarse sand. Sparks flew where metal met reinforced plating. The dog lunged low, teeth snapping, claws rasping concrete, forcing the raider off balance. Rin fired from a side alley, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off metal and stone. One misfire sent a ricochet toward a precarious wall of rubble. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, gauntlet scraping jagged concrete, pushing a settler clear of falling debris. Dust and grit sprayed across armor and boots, tangling in Rin's hair and sparking from her mechanical arm. A low rumble ran through the square. Part of the collapsed overpass shuddered, concrete fragments tilting precariously above the settlers. Doomslayer adjusted stance instantly, pressing armored forearm against a slab, boots grinding into sand, fingers flexing around jagged edges to brace and redirect the weight. The dog barked sharply, muscles coiled, tail stiff. Rin flinched, sparks flickering along her arm. "I didn't see that coming," she muttered, voice clipped, mechanical eye tracking the micro-movement of debris. Her hesitation sent a ripple of instability through the square. Doomslayer acted with ruthless precision. He shifted, pivoted, and launched a chain of strikes against advancing raiders, each hit sending micro-vibrations up through sand, armor, and reinforced gauntlets. Fists collided with chest plates and exposed limbs, sparks and dust erupting in arcs. The dog darted, snapping at ankles, claws rasping broken concrete. The settlers huddled closer, breaths shallow, wide-eyed, pressed against rubble. Rin recalibrated quickly, firing controlled bursts from her hydraulic arm, sparks scattering into the thick air. One raider lunged from behind a toppled wall. Doomslayer pivoted, smashing reinforced elbow into the attacker mid-swipe, sending him sprawling into rubble. Another raider tried to flank the survivors, but the dog intercepted, growl vibrating faintly, claws scraping stone. The rumble increased. A larger section of the overpass groaned ominously, concrete and metal shifting under unseen pressure. Dust cascaded down, mingling with the metallic tang and coppery scent of blood. Doomslayer sensed the micro-vibrations before they became visible. He pivoted, gauntlet scraping jagged rebar, pressing force against shifting debris, guiding settlers clear with calculated precision. Sparks and dust flew in arcs, Rin ducking beside him, recalibrating her aim and footing. The raiders faltered, hesitation rippling through the sand beneath their boots. Doomslayer struck decisively, armored fists smashing into plating and exposed limbs. The dog circled low, growl vibrating faintly, teeth snapping with precision. One raider fell, another staggered, the last froze, calculating risk before retreating. Dust and grit hung heavy in the air as the square settled into tense silence. The metallic tang lingered, mixed with faint coppery blood. Settlers clutched each other, breaths shallow, pressed against walls and rubble. Rin lowered her mechanical arm, sparks hissing softly. The dog nudged Doomslayer's side, tail tip twitching. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Every micro-vibration of settling debris, every faint tremor in the sand, every shadow stretching across fractured concrete was registered. He tilted his head at Rin, acknowledging her presence silently. She had faltered again, but he had managed the threat, corrected it, protected the innocents. The shadows deepened as the hum of irradiated metal pulsed faintly in the air. Sparks flickered from broken machinery, distant debris shifted, and micro-tremors hinted at further dangers. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, scanning ruins. The Wasteland had escalated. The next challenge, larger, deadlier, unavoidable, was already moving toward them. The ruins of the overpass groaned under the weight of twilight, fractured concrete and twisted steel casting long, jagged shadows. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers brushing jagged edges of debris. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, low growl vibrating faintly through the sand. Rin moved ahead, sparks flickering from her mechanical arm as hydraulic servos hissed with each step, boots crunching over rubble. A distant rumble ran through the square, faint at first, growing steadily. Micro-vibrations pulsed through the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots, carrying the subtle cadence of armored footsteps and the heavier, irregular tremors of something larger. Mutants augmented with crude machinery, hulking figures emerging from the ruins. The acrid tang of dust, scorched metal, and coppery blood hung heavy in the air. Rin froze mid-step, hydraulic servos hissing sharply. "I didn't see them coming," she muttered, mechanical eye flickering, sparks showering faintly from exposed wiring. Her movement had triggered the attention of the mutants. The dog growled low, tail stiff, muscles coiled. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising beneath reinforced plates, fingers flexing against jagged concrete, boots pressing into sand for micro-adjustment. The first mutant lunged, claws scraping concrete, sparks flying as augmented limbs collided with twisted metal. Doomslayer pivoted, armored elbow catching the strike, impact reverberating through forearm and sand beneath boots. He followed through with a punch to reinforced plating, sending the mutant staggering back. The dog darted low, teeth snapping, claws rasping broken concrete. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic arm hissing, bullets pinging off metal plating and concrete shards. One ricocheted off a loose steel beam, sending sparks flying, narrowly missing a settler pressed against rubble. "Sorry," she shouted, voice sharp, mechanical eye wide with panic. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, gauntlet scraping jagged rebar, and shoved her out of the way as dust and debris cascaded over the square. The mutants roared, hulking bodies lunging, augmented limbs smashing concrete and steel. Doomslayer moved with deliberate precision, pivoting, smashing armored fists into plating and exposed mechanical limbs. Sparks and dust erupted in fine arcs, coarse sand embedding in gloves and joints. The dog lunged at the nearest mutant, claws rasping metal and stone, teeth snapping at reinforced ankles. One mutant swung a massive mechanical arm, dislodging a steel beam that crashed toward the settlers. Doomslayer leapt, pressing forearm against falling debris, boots grinding into sand, fingers gripping jagged concrete. Micro-vibrations pulsed beneath him, informing every adjustment, every micro-twitch of muscle. He shoved the beam aside just in time, sending sparks and dust cascading into the air. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent, eyes wide. Rin ducked behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering from her arm. I miscalculated again," she admitted, voice low, mechanical eye flickering nervously. Doomslayer did not answer verbally. He inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, muscles coiling beneath reinforced plates. Every vibration, every subtle shift in sand and rubble, every echoing clang of metal was registered and analyzed. The mutant surged again, heavier and more coordinated. Doomslayer pivoted, armored fist smashing into one mutant's exposed augmentation, sending sparks flying and metal grinding. The dog circled low, growl vibrating faintly, teeth snapping at legs and joints. Another mutant lunged from cover. Doomslayer twisted, elbow catching mid-strike, sending it crashing into rubble. Rin fired controlled bursts from the side alley, hydraulic arm hissing, bullets pinging off concrete and metal. A larger mutant emerged from shadowed ruins, its bulk shifting micro-vibrations through sand and debris. The metallic tang of blood, dust, and scorched metal was overpowering. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, sensing every tremor. He pivoted, launching a chain of precise strikes, fists colliding with plating and mechanical limbs, sparks erupting, coarse dust spraying in slow arcs. Rin hesitated, hydraulic servos hissing, mechanical eye flickering. Doomslayer adjusted instinctively, pressing her aside with a shove, sending her behind a low wall as a mutant lunged toward her. The dog intercepted a smaller mutant, claws scraping metal, growl vibrating faintly, tail stiff. The mutants faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through sand beneath their feet. Doomslayer seized the opening, pivoting, fists smashing into exposed plating, sending sparks and coarse dust into the air. One staggered and fell, another froze mid-lunge, calculating risk. The child clutched a parent's arm, whimpering, eyes wide. The square settled into tense silence. Dust and grit hung heavy, metallic tang thick in the air. Sparks from displaced rubble and mechanical augments shimmered in the dim light. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressing jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath armor plates. Micro-vibrations still pulsed faintly, settling debris. Distant echoes of movement, faint hum of irradiated metal. He tilted his head slightly at Rin. She had faltered again, yes, but he had adapted, controlled, and survived. The dog nudged his armored side, tail tip twitching. Beyond the ruins, shadows shifted, faint rumble hinting at further dangers. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, scanning the ruins. The midpoint had passed. The next stage of the Wasteland's test was coming, and he would meet it head-on. The ruins lay under a blanket of deep shadow, fractured concrete and twisted steel jagged in the dim light of the irradiated dusk. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boot pressing into coarse sand, fingers tracing rough edges of debris. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, low growl vibrating faintly through the sand. Rin moved ahead, sparks flickering from her mechanical arm, hydraulic servos hissing softly as she stepped over loose rubble. From the far edge of the square came a new sound, the distant, deliberate hum of a pre-war power generator still active in a partially collapsed building. Its mechanical pulse resonated through the sand, subtle vibrations rippling beneath Doomslayer's boots. He inhaled slowly, chest rising under reinforced plates, sensing every micro-shift in debris, every tremor, every echo of movement. The acrid metallic tang of dust and irradiated steel mixed with the faint coppery odor of dried blood, clinging to armor and fur alike. Rin whispered, voice clipped and tense. "Generators. It's powering something. I can try to disable it." Her mechanical eye flickered, hydraulic servos hissing. Sparks flew from exposed wiring as she moved forward. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly, micro-vibrations in the sand, alerting him to her misjudged footing. He recognized the risk before it happened. A loud metallic clang echoed as she stepped on a loose beam. Sparks erupted, dust and small fragments scattering into the air. The dog barked sharply, muscles coiling, tail stiff. Doomslayer shifted instantly, pivoting, forearms scraping jagged concrete, pushing Rin back just as a fragment of the collapsing beam threatened to strike her. She stumbled, mechanical arm whistling as sparks flew from a joint. "Damn it!" she muttered, regaining footing. From the shadows emerged a group of raiders, heavier armored, rifles glinting faintly. The vibration of their boots pulsed through the sand, signaling their advance. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising under reinforced plates, analyzing micro-tremors in the sand, subtle shifts in air, the faint mechanical whine from their servos. The acrid tang of dust, sweat, and scorched metal thickened with each step. The first raider lunged, knife glinting in the low light. Doomslayer pivoted, elbow catching the attack mid-swipe, impact reverberating through gauntlet and sand. Sparks flew where armor met metal plating. The dog lunged low, teeth snapping, claws rasping broken concrete. Rin fired controlled bursts, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off concrete and metal. One ricochet struck loose rubble, sending fragments tumbling toward the civilians. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, armored forearm catching a slab, grit and dust spraying across armor and the dog's fur. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent, eyes wide with terror. A hulking mutant emerged from the generator building, augmented with crude machinery, eyes glowing faintly. Sparks danced across its plating as it lumbered forward, vibrations rippling through the sand. Doomslayer shifted, pressing boots into coarse debris, fingers gripping jagged concrete, coiling like a spring before launching strikes. Armored fists smashed into exposed augmentation, sparks erupting in arcs, coarse dust spraying into the fading light. Rin tried to flank, misjudging the mutant's momentum. She stumbled over broken concrete, hydraulic servos squealing. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, pushing her to safety as the mutant swung a massive mechanical arm. Sparks and dust erupted as the limb collided with concrete near where she had been. The dog intercepted a smaller mutant, claws rasping metal, teeth snapping, low growl vibrating faintly through the sand. The hulking mutant faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through its massive limbs. Doomslayer seized the moment, pivoting, armored fists smashing plating and exposed augmentation. Sparks flew, dust and grit scattering. One raider went down, another staggered back, calculating the risk of continued engagement. A section of the overpass shifted ominously, dust cascading down in thick clouds. Doomslayer adjusted instantly, pressing forearm against tilting debris, boots grinding into sand for leverage. Fingers flexed around jagged edges to redirect weight, coiling muscles absorbing shock. The settlers huddled together, breaths shallow, wide-eyed, pressed against rubble. Rin ducked behind a fractured wall, sparks hissing from her mechanical arm. "I miscalculated." "Again," she admitted, mechanical eye flickering nervously. Doomslayer did not respond verbally, chest rising deliberately, analyzing every micro-tremor, every vibration in sand, every whisper of movement. He pivoted, elbows smashing, plating and limbs, dust and sparks erupting in slow arcs, dog darting low, teeth snapping. The hulking mutant stumbled and fell. One raider retreated, the remaining raiders hesitated, micro-vibrations of uncertainty rippling through the sand. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly, chest rising beneath armor. Micro-tremors of debris, distant echoes, faint hum of irradiated metal, all registered in his awareness. He tilted his head slightly at Rin. She had faltered, yes, but he had managed, adapted, protected the innocents. Sparks from broken machinery flickered in the shadows, dust settling slowly over fractured concrete. The square was temporarily silent, but every micro-vibration, every whisper of movement told him the Wasteland was not done testing them. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, scanning ruins. The midpoint had passed. The high-stakes confrontation loomed closer. The next step would demand even more precision, decisiveness, and ruthlessness, and the Wasteland was ready to push him further. The square was shrouded in shadow. Fractured concrete and twisted steel jagged in the dim glow of irradiated dusk. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers tracing jagged edges of debris. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, growl low and resonant. Sparks flickered from Rin's mechanical arm, hydraulic servos hissing softly as she edged toward a precarious pile of rubble shielding the settlers. From the far side of the square, a deep guttural growl resonated, vibrating through the sand. Mutants, augmented with crude pre-war machinery, emerged from shadowed ruins, hulking and uneven, their claws scraping metal and concrete. Micro-vibrations pulsed through the ground, carrying the rhythm of their approach up to Doomslayer's armored legs. The metallic tang of scorched steel and coppery blood hung thick in the air, clinging to armor and fur alike. Rin's voice cut through the tension, clipped and nervous. "They're bigger than I expected. I can—" Sparks flickered from her exposed wiring as she misjudged a loose beam. It tumbled, crashing against the rubble near the settlers, dust and grit spraying. The child whimpered, pressed close to a parent. Doomslayer reacted instantly. He pivoted, boots grinding into coarse sand, forearms scraping jagged concrete, pushing Rin out of harm's way. Dust cascaded over armor and fur. The dog lunged low, teeth snappings, his claws rasping stone to deflect smaller fragments. The mutants surged forward, claws slicing through air and metal, augmented limbs colliding with rubble. Doomslayer moved with precise, calculated rhythm, pivoting, smashing armored fists into plating and exposed augmentation. Sparks flew, coarse dust sprayed in arcs. The dog intercepted a mutant lunging toward a child, growl vibrating faintly, tail stiff. Rin fired from a side alley, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off metal plating and concrete. One ricochet struck a loose slab, sending fragments toward the trapped settlers. Doomslayer twisted, elbow catching a mutant mid-swipe, pushing the debris aside, grit spraying, chest rising deliberately under reinforced plates. A larger mutant emerged from the shadows, its augmented bulk radiating micro-vibrations through the sand. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, absorbing every pulse, the tremor of its weight, the subtle vibrations from shifting rubble, the faint metallic hum of servos. He adjusted stance, pivoting, armored fists smashing into exposed plating, sparks and dust spraying. Rin attempted to flank, misjudging her footing again. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, pushing her clear just as the mutant swung a mechanical arm at her. Sparks and debris erupted. The dog lunged, snapping teeth at the mutant's exposed legs, claws rasping concrete. One mutant toppled, staggering, while the hulking leader froze mid-lunge, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through the sand. Doomslayer seized the opportunity, pivoting, fists colliding with augmented plating, sparks flying, dust settling slowly over jagged concrete. The remaining raiders and mutants hesitated, calculating the risk, allowing settlers to edge toward relative safety. A section of the overpass groaned, tilting ominously. Doomslayer pressed armored forearm against the shifting slab, fingers gripping jagged concrete, boots grinding into coarse sand. Coiled muscles absorbed the shock. Sparks danced across broken machinery and displaced metal. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent. Rin crouched behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering along her arm. I didn't mean for this, she muttered, voice low, mechanical eye tracking every micro-movement. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly, chest rising deliberately, assessing vibrations in sand, debris, and approaching threats. No words were needed. He pivoted, launching a precise chain of strikes, fists smashing exposed augmentation and plating, sparks and dust erupting, coarse grit embedding in armor joints. The dog circled low, growl vibrating faintly, teeth snapping. The mutants faltered, one falling, the leader retreating reluctantly, micro-vibrations of fear radiating through the sand. Silence settled over the square, thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood and scorched steel. Settlers clutched each other, breaths shallow, wide-eyed, pressed against rubble. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed against jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Every micro-vibration, every tremor, every whisper of movement registered. He tilted his head at Rin. She had faltered twice, yes, but he had managed, adapted, protected the innocents. Sparks flickered from broken machinery, dust settling slowly over fractured concrete. The midpoint had passed. The point of no return had arrived. The Wasteland would demand more than skill or strength. The next move would test every microsecond of Doomslayer's perception, every ounce of decisiveness. The shadows deepened, pulsing faintly with micro-vibrations, the hum of irradiated metal vibrating in the air. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising, scanning the ruins. The point of no return was here. Survival and the choices he would have to make would shape the rest of the Wasteland story. The square was quiet now, but the air still hummed with tension. Dust hung thick, settling slowly over fractured concrete and twisted steel, metallic tang clinging to Doomslayer's respirator, his boots pressed into coarse sand, fingers tracing jagged edges of debris as he scanned the ruins. The dog remained close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, growl low and resonant. Rin crouched beside him, sparks flickering from her mechanical arm, hydraulic servos hissing softly as she tried to steady herself. Too many of them, Rin muttered, voice low, mechanical eye tracking the remaining shadows. If we stay here, they'll come back. She shifted on loose rubble, sending micro-vibrations through the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots. He inhaled deliberately, chest rising under reinforced plates, analyzing every subtle tremor and vibration. The acrid tang of dust and scorched metal filled his nostrils, mixed with faint coppery blood from previous skirmishes. Doomslayer scanned the horizon. Raiders had retreated, but the hulking mutant leader had disappeared into the ruins, and the distant hum of irradiated machinery pulsed faintly through the sand. Settlers huddled together, shaken, pressed against jagged steel and concrete. The child whimpered softly, hair dust-covered, skin faintly smeared with grit and blood. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, boots grinding into coarse sand, micro-vibrations informing every adjustment. "Rin," he said finally, voice low and measured, "we need to move them, now." He didn't wait for her answer. The overpass groaned again, loose concrete shifting slightly, dust cascading in fine arcs. Sparks flickered from broken machinery embedded in the ruins. The dog lunged forward, teeth snapping at a loose slab sliding toward the nearest settler. Rin scrambled after him, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks scattering faintly from her exposed arm. She tried to guide a small group of settlers toward a partially intact wall, but misjudged a step. Loose rubble shifted beneath her, sending dust into the air. Doomslayer adjusted instantly, pivoting, gauntlet scraping jagged concrete, shoving her clear before the debris could strike. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent, wide-eyed. Micro-vibrations ran through the sand as a section of the overpass groaned ominously, shifting precariously above the square. Doomslayer pressed armored forearm against the slab, fingers gripping jagged concrete, boots grinding into sand for leverage. Sparks and coarse dust erupted into the air, clinging to armor and the dog's fur. The settlers froze, breaths shallow, pressed against rubble. Rin ducked behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing. I keep screwing this up," she muttered, sparks flickering along her arm. Doomslayer did not respond verbally. Chest rising deliberately beneath reinforced plates, he sensed every micro-tremor in sand, debris, and approaching shadows. No words were needed. Suddenly, a faint scraping echoed from the shadows, a small group of raiders returning, cautious, boots grinding against loose asphalt and rubble. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, eyes narrowing behind the visor. The metallic tang of sweat and crude oil mixed with dust and scorched metal. Micro-vibrations told him their rhythm, their weight distribution, even their hesitations. He pivoted, dog darting low, teeth snapping, claws rasping concrete, fists smashed into armored plating and exposed limbs, sparks and dust erupting in arcs. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off metal and stone. One raider lunged from cover, knife glinting. Doomslayer twisted, elbow catching mid-swipe, force reverberating through sand and armor. The overpass trembled again, loose concrete and steel shifting. Doomslayer adjusted instantly, pressing forearm against tilting debris, boots grinding into coarse sand. The dog barked sharply, muscles coiled, tail stiff. Settlers clutched each other, pressed against rubble, breaths shallow. Finally, the raiders faltered, hesitation rippling through micro-vibrations beneath their feet. Doomslayer seized the moment, pivoting, fists smashing into exposed plating, sending sparks and dust into the dimming air. The hulking mutant leader was nowhere to be seen, but the square was temporarily secure. Dust settled slowly, metallic tang heavy, faint coppery blood still lingering in the air. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. He tilted his head at Rin. She had faltered again, yes, but he had managed the threat, adapted, protected the innocents. Sparks flickered from broken machinery in the ruins, distant tremors hinting at further dangers. The square was quiet, but the fallout of the battle was just beginning. Settlers whispered, the child whimpered softly, dust clinging to skin and hair. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, scanning ruins. The Wasteland had tested them again, but the consequences, both immediate and looming, would follow them into the next stage. The air was thick with dust, the acrid tang of scorched metal and faint coppery blood lingering from the previous skirmish. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers brushing jagged edges of debris. The dog stayed close, tail stiff, muscles coiled. growl vibrating faintly. Rin moved ahead, sparks flickering along her mechanical arm as hydraulic servos hissed softly. She paused at a half-collapsed wall, scanning for the survivors, boots crunching over broken concrete and rubble. "Some of them are panicking," Rin muttered, voice clipped, mechanical eye flickering. "We need to get them moving. Now!" She adjusted her footing on loose rubble, sending subtle vibrations through the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots. He inhaled deliberately, chest rising beneath reinforced plates, fingers flexing against jagged concrete, sensing every micro-shift in debris and the faint tremor of distant movement. The settlers were gathering, but fear was spreading. The child whimpered softly, pressed against a parent, eyes wide and darting toward shadows. Doomslayer assessed the micro-vibrations of the ground, every scuff of a boot, every shift of rubble, every subtle tremor in the sand, and began to organize the movement. A faint clatter echoed from the ruins. A group of raiders was returning, moving cautiously. Their boots scraped broken asphalt and sand, sending subtle vibrations through the square. The acrid tang of sweat and crude oil mixed with dust and metallic blood, sharp in Doomslayer's nostrils. He inhaled slowly, adjusting his stance, fingers flexing, chest rising beneath reinforced armor plates. Rin stepped forward to guide a settler, but misjudged her footing. Loose rubble shifted beneath her boot, sending dust and grit into the air. Doomslayer pivoted instantly, armored forearm scraping jagged concrete, shoving her out of the way. Sparks flew from exposed wiring along her mechanical arm. The child whimpered louder, pressed against a parent, wide-eyed. The returning raiders paused, assessing the square. Doomslayer pivoted, dog lunging low, teeth snapping, claws rasping stone. Armored fists smashed into exposed plating and mechanical limbs, sparks erupting in arcs, coarse dust embedding in gloves and armor joints. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off metal and stone. One raider lunged from cover, knife glinting in the dim light. Doomslayer twisted, elbow catching the swipe mid-air, impact reverberating through forearm and coarse sand. The dog leapt, intercepting the raider's legs, claws scraping concrete, growl vibrating faintly through the square. The overpass groaned ominously, loose concrete and steel shifting above them. Doomslayer pressed armored forearm against the tilting slab, fingers gripping jagged edges, boots grinding into coarse sand for leverage. Sparks danced across broken machinery and displaced metal. The settlers froze, pressed against rubble, breaths shallow. Rin ducked behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing softly. I misjudged that," she muttered, mechanical eye flickering. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly, chest rising deliberately, scanning micro-vibrations of sand, debris, and approaching threats. No words were necessary. A mutant, smaller than the hulking leader, but still augmented with crude machinery, emerged from a shadowed corridor. Its mechanical limbs hissed faintly as it moved, vibration rippling through sand. Doomslayer pivoted, fists smashing into plating and augmentation, sparks flying, coarse dust scattering. The dog lunged, teeth snapping at exposed joints, claws rasping stone. The returning raiders hesitated, micro-vibrations of fear rippling through sand beneath their boots. Doomslayer seized the opening, pivoting, fists colliding with exposed plating and limbs, sparks and dust erupting in arcs. One raider fell, another staggered back, the last froze, calculating risk before retreating. Dust settled slowly, metallic tang heavy in the air. Settlers clutched each other, the child pressed against a parent wide-eyed, breaths shallow. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Sparks flickered from broken machinery embedded in the ruins, micro-vibrations pulsing faintly beneath his boots. He tilted his head slightly at Rin. She had faltered again, yes, but he had adapted, corrected the threat, protected the innocents. The square was temporarily secure, but the fallout was just beginning. Micro-tremors from distant rubble hinted at lingering instability. The Wasteland had tested them again, and the spiral of consequences was already unfolding. The ruins lay in semi-darkness, fractured concrete jagged against the fading light. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers brushing the rough edges of debris. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, growl low and resonant. Sparks flickered from Rin's mechanical arm as she moved ahead, hydraulic servos hissing softly. She scanned the surrounding rubble, eyes flicking to every shadow, every micro-shift in debris. The acrid tang of dust and scorched metal hung heavy, mingling with the faint coppery smell of dried blood. Settlers shuffled uneasily, pressed against jagged steel and fractured concrete. The child whimpered softly, clutching a parent's arm, eyes wide. Micro-vibrations ran through the sand beneath Doomslayer's boots, the faint tremor of shifting rubble, the rhythm of distant steps. He inhaled slowly, chest rising beneath reinforced plates, sensing every subtle movement. Rin's voice was tight. "Some of the generator circuits are sparking. If it goes, the whole overpass could collapse." Sparks flickered faintly along her exposed wiring, hydraulic servos whining softly. She misjudged a step over rubble, sending a small cascade of debris down. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, forearm scraping jagged concrete, shoving her out of harm's way. Dust erupted in arcs, clinging to armor and the dog's fur. A deep rumble rolled through the square, faint at first, growing steadily. The hulking mutant leader, augmented with crude machinery, emerged from the shadowed ruins, claws scraping metal, eyes glowing faintly. Micro-vibrations pulsed through the sand, alerting Doomslayer to its weight and momentum. The acrid tang of metal and blood thickened in the air. Rin attempted to flank the mutant, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering along her arm. She stumbled over loose rubble, sending grit and dust into the air. Doomslayer pivoted, pushing her clear just as the mutant swung a massive mechanical arm. Sparks erupted, chunks of concrete scattered. The dog lunged low, teeth snapping at exposed legs, claws rasping stone. Doomslayer reacted with precision, pivoting, armored fists smashing exposed plating, sparks and coarse dust spraying in slow arcs. The child whimpered, pressed tightly against a parent. Settlers shifted uneasily, breaths shallow, wide-eyed. The mutant roared, the sound vibrating through sand and debris, micro-tremors rippling beneath Doomslayer's boots. He pressed forearm against shifting rubble, boots grinding into sand, fingers gripping jagged edges, coiling muscles, absorbing shock. Sparks danced off displaced machinery, dust swirling in thick clouds. Raiders emerged again from shadowed corridors, cautious but determined. Their boots scraped rubble, sending micro-vibrations through the square. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, analyzing their rhythm, every subtle tremor of weight distribution, the faint mechanical whine of servos. The mutant lunged, mechanical arm swinging, sending a shockwave of vibrations through the sand. Doomslayer pivoted sharply, elbows smashing into the augmented plating, sparks and dust erupting. The dog leapt low, intercepting an attack aimed at a settler, teeth snapping. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off metal and stone. Suddenly, the generator in the collapsed building sparked violently, arcs of electricity dancing across exposed circuits. Dust rose in choking clouds, metallic tang sharp and overwhelming. Doomslayer felt micro-vibrations of instability beneath his boots, fingers gripping jagged concrete tightly. The overpass groaned ominously, concrete slabs tilting. Rin froze, sparks flickering from her arm, mechanical eye wide. "If it collapses," she murmured, hydraulic servos whining in panic. Doomslayer did not respond verbally. He inhaled slowly, chest rising beneath armor, coiled muscles ready. He pivoted, shoving Rin out of the direct path of falling rubble as the generator sparked again, arcs jumping to fractured steel beams. The hulking mutant leader lunged, claws extended, augmented limbs tearing into concrete and steel. Doomslayer twisted, armored fist colliding with exposed plating, sparks and dust erupting, coarse sand embedding in gloves and joints. The dog lunged at its legs, growl vibrating faintly, tail stiff. One raider lunged from cover, knife glinting. Doomslayer pivoted, elbow intercepting, impact reverberating through forearm and sand. The overpass trembled violently. Dust and debris cascaded in thick clouds. Sparks from the generator danced along fractured metal. Settlers screamed, pressed tightly against rubble, wide-eyed. The child clung to a parent, shaking. Doomslayer pivoted with precise rhythm, fists smashing into augmented plating, sparks flying. He shoved a concrete slab to redirect the mutant's swing, coiling muscles absorbing the impact. Micro-vibrations of every step, every tremor, every scrape of metal informed every movement. The hulking mutant leader faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through its augmented limbs. Raiders hesitated, assessing risk. Doomslayer seized the moment, pivoting, delivering a chain of precise strikes. Sparks flew, coarse dust sprayed, debris settling slowly. One raider fell, another staggered, the last froze, calculating the risk of continuing. Rin ducked behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering faintly. I'm sorry," she muttered. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly, chest rising deliberately, scanning micro-vibrations of sand, rubble, and movement. The dog nudged his side, tail tip twitching. The square was silent for a heartbeat, thick with dust, metallic tang, and faint, coppery blood. Micro-vibrations pulsed faintly beneath boots, settling debris, faint hum of irradiated machinery, distant echoes of movement. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, scanning ruins. The point of no return had passed. The generator hissed dangerously, the overpass trembled, mutants and raiders loomed. The Wasteland demanded one final decisive action. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, coiled muscles ready, senses sharpened. Every micro-vibration, every subtle tremor, every whisper of movement was a signal. The grand climax had arrived, and survival would demand everything he had. The ruins quaked under the faint glow of the failing generator, dust and sparks hanging thick in the air. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers tracing jagged concrete edges, feeling every micro-vibration of the unstable square. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, growl low and steady. Rin hovered at the edge of a precarious pile of rubble, sparks flickering along her mechanical arm, hydraulic servos hissing as she tried to stabilize herself. We can't hold this," Rin muttered, voice tight, mechanical eye flickering. Her boot slipped slightly on loose debris, sending a cascade of dust and small fragments down. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, forearm scraping jagged concrete, pushing her out of harm's way. Sparks sprayed faintly, dust settling in slow arcs, clinging to armor and fur. The hulking mutant leader appeared again, emerging from the shadowed ruins, augmented claws slicing the air. Its bulk reverberated through the sand, micro-tremors vibrating up Doomslayer's legs. Raiders followed, boots scraping rubble, rhythmical pulses of impending threat, sending subtle shivers through the sand. The acrid tang of blood, sweat, and scorched metal saturated the air. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately beneath reinforced plates, muscles coiling beneath armor. Every micro-vibration informed each movement, each pivot, each swing of armored fists, each adjustment of stance. He pivoted, gauntlet colliding with exposed plating of a raider, sparks and dust spraying. The dog lunged, teeth snapping at mechanical limbs, claws rasping stone. Rin tried to flank a mutant, but misjudged her footing again. Doomslayer shoved her clear just as an augmented arm smashed toward her, chunks of concrete scattering, sparks erupting from broken machinery. The child whimpered, pressed against a parent, eyes wide. The generator sparked violently, arcs of electricity dancing along fractured circuits, illuminating the square in brief, harsh flashes. Dust rose, metallic tang sharp in Doomslayer's nostrils. The overpass groaned ominously, tilting slabs threatening to collapse entirely. Micro-vibrations pulsed beneath boots, debris shifting dangerously. Doomslayer pressed forearm against a leaning slab, boots grinding into coarse sand, fingers gripping jagged edges. Sparks danced along broken metal, dust cascading into the air. He pivoted sharply, fists smashing into exposed augmentation of the hulking mutant, sparks and grit spraying in arcs. The dog lunged low, growl vibrating faintly, tail stiff. Raiders advanced cautiously, micro-vibrations of their boots informing Doomslayer of each step, each hesitation. He pivoted, elbows smashing plating and augmented limbs, sending sparks and coarse dust erupting. A mutant lunged from shadow, mechanical arms swinging. Doomslayer twisted, armored fist colliding mid-swing, reverberation pulsing up his gauntlet and legs. The overpass trembled violently, loose concrete and steel falling in showers of dust and sparks. Settlers screamed, pressing against jagged rubble. The child cried, clinging tightly to a parent. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, coiling every muscle beneath reinforced plates, adjusting stance as micro-vibrations informed every movement. Rin crouched behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering faintly along her arm. I keep screwing this up," she muttered, mechanical eye tracking every tremor. Doomslayer did not answer. He pivoted, fists smashing into plating and exposed augmentation, dog circling low, teeth snapping, growl vibrating faintly. The hulking mutant faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through its augmented limbs. Raiders froze, assessing risk. Doomslayer seized the moment, pivoting with precision, fists colliding with plating and limbs, sparks and dust erupting in controlled arcs. One raider fell, another staggered back, the last froze, calculating the risk of continuing engagement. Dust settled slowly, thick with metallic tang and coppery blood. Settlers huddled together, breaths shallow, wide-eyed, pressed against rubble. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Micro-vibrations pulsed faintly beneath his boots, debris settling, distant echoes, faint hum of irradiated machinery. He tilted his head slightly at Rin. She had faltered, yes, but he had managed, adapted, protected the innocents. Sparks flickered across broken machinery, dust slowly settling over fractured concrete. The wasteland had escalated, the fallout intensifying. Every shadow, every vibration, every whisper of movement screamed that the final confrontation was imminent. The generator hissed dangerously. The overpass threatened collapse. Mutants and raiders loomed. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, muscles coiled, senses razor sharp. The grand climax was arriving, and every choice, every micro-movement would determine survival. The generator arced violently, electrical sparks dancing across exposed circuits, lighting the ruins in harsh, intermittent flashes. Dust hung thick, the metallic tang of scorched steel and faint coppery blood mixing sharply in the air. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressing into coarse sand, fingers gripping jagged edges of fractured concrete. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, growl low and resonant. Rin hovered at the edge of a crumbling wall, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering along her mechanical arm. The hulking mutant leader roared, vibrations pulsing through sand and debris, micro-tremors informing Doomslayer of every lurch, every swing of its augmented limbs. Raiders surged forward from shadowed corridors, boots scraping rubble, metal plating glinting faintly in the harsh flashes. The acrid tang of sweat, oil, and blood filled every inhale. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising beneath reinforced plates, coiling muscles beneath armor ready for action. He pivoted, fists smashing into exposed augmentation, sparks and dust erupting in controlled arcs. The dog lunged low, teeth snapping, claws rasping concrete, growl vibrating faintly through the square. Rin attempted to flank the mutant leader, but misjudged her footing. Loose rubble shifted beneath her, sending grit and dust into the air. Doomslayer reacted instantly, pivoting, armored forearms scraping jagged concrete, shoving her out of harm's way. Sparks erupted from her mechanical arm, dust cascading over armor and fur. The child whimpered, pressed tightly against a parent, eyes wide. The overpass trembled violently, loose concrete slabs threatening collapse. Micro-vibrations pulsed beneath Doomslayer's boots, debris shifting dangerously. He pressed forearm against a tilting slab, fingers gripping jagged edges, boots grounding into coarse sand. Sparks danced across broken metal, dust rising in thick clouds. The mutant lunged, mechanical arms swinging, augmented claws slicing through the air. Doomslayer pivoted sharply, armored fist colliding mid-swing, impact reverberating through sand, armor, and gauntlet. The dog lunged, intercepting a smaller mutant, teeth snapping, claws rasping stone. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off metal and stone. One raider lunged from the shadows, knife glinting. Doomslayer twisted, elbow intercepting mid-strike, sending the attacker sprawling into rubble. Sparks and dust erupted in arcs. The generator sparked again, arcs leaping to nearby twisted beams, sending showers of sparks into the air. Dust mixed with metallic tang filled every breath. The square trembled as part of the overpass shifted dangerously. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, analyzing every micro-vibration, settling debris, distant echoes of movement, each subtle tremor in sand and metal. He pivoted, armored fists smashing plating and exposed augmentation, sparks flying, coarse dust spraying. The hulking mutant leader faltered, micro-vibrations of hesitation rippling through its massive limbs. Raiders froze, assessing risk. Doomslayer seized the moment, chain striking, fists smashing into plating and mechanical augmentation, dust and sparks erupting. One raider fell, another staggered back. The last froze mid-lunge. Rin ducked behind a fractured wall, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering faintly along her arm. I didn't mean for this," she muttered, mechanical eye wide with panic. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly, chest rising deliberately, coiled muscles ready beneath reinforced plates. No words were needed. The generator hissed, electricity arcing dangerously, illuminating the ruins in intermittent flashes. The overpass groaned ominously, slabs shifting and debris teetering. Mutants and raiders loomed, the settlers pressed against rubble, wide-eyed, breaths shallow. The child whimpered softly. Every micro-vibration, every tremor, every subtle shift informed Doomslayer's next move. He pivoted, fists smashing augmented plating, sparks and dust erupting, coiling muscles absorbing shock. The dog lunged low, teeth snapping, growl vibrating faintly. A mutant lunged at a settler. Doomslayer twisted mid-pivot, forearm intercepting, sending debris crashing to the side. The hulking mutant leader staggered, hesitation rippling through its massive limbs. Micro-vibrations of fear and uncertainty pulsed through sand and debris. Doomslayer seized the moment, pivoting with precision, striking exposed augmentation and plating, sending sparks and coarse dust into the thick air. Raiders faltered, retreating cautiously. Settlers pressed tightly together, eyes wide, breaths shallow. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Micro-vibrations pulsed faintly beneath his boots, settling debris, faint hum of irradiated machinery, distant echoes of movement. Sparks danced along broken metal, dust rising in slow arcs. The generator sparked violently one final time, the overpass groaning with imminent collapse. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising, senses razor-sharp. The dog nudged his armored side, tail-tip twitching. Shadows shifted around the square, mutants and raiders faltering. Every instinct, every micro-movement, every decision would determine the outcome. The grand climax had arrived. Survival, protection, and the consequences of every choice were now converging in this single perilous moment. The generator had finally begun to die, its violent sparks fading into intermittent flickers. Dust hung thick metallic tang sharp in the air, mingling with faint coppery blood. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressed into coarse sand, fingers gripping jagged edges of fractured concrete. The dog stayed close, muscles coiled, tail stiff, growl vibrating low and steady. Rin moved shakily along the edge of the rubble, hydraulic servos hissing, sparks flickering along her mechanical arm. I think that's it. For now, she muttered, voice tight. Loose debris shifted beneath her boot. Doomslayer pivoted instantly, forearm scraping jagged concrete, pushing her out of the way as dust cascaded around them. The hulking mutant leader lay prone, partially disabled from Doomslayer's strikes, augmented limbs twitching faintly. Raiders who had survived the encounter pressed cautiously toward the ruins, boots scraping rubble, metal glinting faintly in the fading light. Micro-vibrations pulsed through sand and debris, signaling their approach. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. He pivoted, fists smashing into plating and exposed augmentation, sparks and coarse dust erupting in arcs. The dog lunged low, teeth snapping at a smaller raider, claws rasping concrete. Rin fired from cover, hydraulic servos hissing, bullets pinging off twisted metal and fractured concrete. Settlers huddled together, wide-eyed, pressed against rubble, breaths shallow. The child whimpered softly, clinging to a parent. Doomslayer adjusted stance, boots grinding into coarse sand, fingers flexing against jagged edges, sensing every micro-tremor, every subtle vibration of sand, metal, and debris. The overpass groaned ominously, slabs teetering above, dust cascading slowly. Sparks danced from broken machinery, arcs of electricity leaping faintly as the generator sputtered. Doomslayer pivoted sharply, elbows smashing plating and exposed limbs, sending dust and sparks into the thick air. The dog circled low, growl vibrating faintly, tail stiff. Rin stumbled, loose rubble shifting beneath her again. "Damn it!" she muttered, hydraulic servos hissing. Doomslayer reacted instantly, shoving her clear, forearm scraping jagged concrete, dust and sparks erupting. He inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, coiled muscles absorbing the impact. The hulking mutant leader twitched, struggling to rise, micro-vibrations of hesitation radiating through its augmented limbs. Doomslayer seized the opportunity, pivoting with precision, fists smashing exposed plating, sending sparks and coarse dust into the air. The remaining raiders froze, calculating risk. A smaller mutant lunged at a settler, claws extended. Doomslayer twisted mid-pivot, intercepting with forearm and armored gauntlet, sending debris crashing aside. Sparks flew, dust cascading in thick clouds, metallic tang filling the air. The dog snapped at the mutant's legs, growl vibrating low. The generator's last spark flickered and died. The overpass creaked one final time, slabs shifting but holding. Micro-vibrations pulsed faintly beneath boots, settling debris, distant echoes of movement, faint hum of irradiated metal. Doomslayer crouched low, fingers pressed into jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into coarse sand, chest rising beneath reinforced plates. Rin exhaled sharply, sparks fizzing from her mechanical arm. "We made it," she muttered. The child clung tightly to a parent, eyes wide, breathing uneven. Settlers slowly began to move toward a safer section of the square, cautious but relieved. Doomslayer tilted his head slightly at Rin. She had faltered, yes, but he had managed, adapted, and protected the innocents. Every micro-vibration, every subtle tremor, every whisper of movement had informed his decisive actions. Dust settled slowly, metallic tang lingering in the thick air. Sparks from broken machinery faded. The immediate threat was over. But the Wasteland was still unforgiving. The ruins groaned faintly in the settling dust, micro-tremors hinting at instability. Raiders might return, mutants might re-emerge, and the consequences of every choice made in the battle would follow them. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising beneath reinforced plates, senses sharp. The first wave had been survived, but the fallout, the spiral of danger and moral consequence, was just beginning. Dust hung in the air like a lingering memory, coarse grains clinging to armor and fur, metallic tang faint but persistent. Doomslayer crouched low, armored boots pressed into the coarse sand, fingers tracing the jagged edges of fractured concrete, muscles slowly unwinding from the tension of battle. The dog circled close, tail stiff at first, then relaxing slightly as growls faded. Rin leaned against a partially intact wall, sparks flickering softly along her mechanical arm, hydraulic servos hissing faintly as she exhaled. The square was quiet, only the distant creak of shifting ruins breaking the silence. The generator had finally died. Its last arcs of electricity faded into darkness, leaving only the soft glimmer of sparks from broken metal scattered across the sand. Settlers were emerging cautiously from behind rubble, faces smeared with dust and fear, eyes wide as they assessed the aftermath. The child pressed against a parent, slowly releasing their grip, breaths finally evening. Doomslayer rose slowly, armored gauntlets brushing coarse concrete, boots grinding into the sand with measured weight. Micro-vibrations beneath him confirmed the immediate threat was over, though the ruins groaned faintly in settling dust, a reminder that the wasteland never truly rested. The dog nudged his side, tail wagging slightly, sensing the shift in tension. Rin approached cautiously, hydraulic servos hissing as she steadied herself. I didn't screw up this time, she muttered, mechanical eye flickering, half-smile breaking through. Sparks danced faintly along her arm, reflecting the dim light of the fading generator glow. Doomslayer tilted his head, chest rising deliberately beneath reinforced plates, coiled muscles slowly unwinding, and gave a subtle nod. Settlers began to move, gathering in small groups, brushing dust from clothing, checking one another for injuries. The child's hand slipped into Rin's, eyes wide but beginning to trust, reassured by the presence of protectors who had survived the storm. Doomslayer observed quietly, micro-vibrations in the sand, informing him of every subtle movement, every cautious step, but no threat emerged. Above, fractured slabs of the overpass groaned faintly, but held. Beams of dim, irradiated light pierced the cracks in the ruins, illuminating dust motes drifting lazily through the air. The acrid tang of metal lingered faintly, but was now joined by the earthy scent of coarse sand and debris slowly settling. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising beneath armor plates, feeling the calm after the storm settle over the square. Rin exhaled sharply, sparks flickering one last time before dying down. "We actually made it," she said softly, voice carrying a mixture of relief and awe. The child looked up, wide eyes meeting Doomslayer's visor, and for the first time in the ruins' chaos, a small smile broke through fear. Doomslayer flexed fingers against jagged concrete, boots grinding lightly into sand, the dog nudging his side. No words were necessary. The battle had been survived. Lives had been saved. And while the wasteland outside this square remained brutal and unyielding, a new status quo had been forged within this fragile pocket of ruins, a place where the survivors could breathe, reorganize, and carry the memory of resilience forward. Above, faint rays of the setting sun pierced the horizon, dust catching the light, scattering in fractured beams across the ruins. Sparks from broken machinery reflected briefly before fading, shadows receding. The acrid tang of blood and metal was replaced by the quieter, warmer scent of coarse sand and settling debris. Doomslayer inhaled deliberately, chest rising, senses still alert but at ease for the first time in days. The dog lay down beside him, tail thumping lightly, growl gone. Rin straightened fully, mechanical eye tracking the survivors as they began moving toward safer sections of the square. We can rebuild," she said, voice steadier now, hinting at hope. Doomslayer tilted his head, chest rising deliberately beneath armor, muscles coiling one final time before relaxing. No words were needed. The survivors understood. The immediate danger had passed. The wasteland could wait. Dust continued to settle, sunlight scattering across jagged concrete and twisted steel, illuminating the scars of battle. The square, once a chaotic nexus of fire, steel, and blood, now held a fragile stillness. Doomslayer stood tall, visor reflecting the soft light, the dog at his side, Rin nearby, mechanical arm quiet. The survivors gathered themselves, finding courage in their protectors. The wasteland beyond remained unpredictable, dangerous and merciless. But in this moment, this square, a small victory had been carved from ruin. A picture-perfect calm after the storm, fragile but earned. offering a new beginning amid the relentless chaos of the fallout wasteland. Doomslayer inhaled slowly, chest rising deliberately, fingers brushing jagged concrete one last time. Sparks and dust had faded, shadows had receded, and the square stood as a silent monument to survival, precision, and resilience. The dog nudged him, tail wagging lightly. Rin gave a